Welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and right here in WrestleRant, I break down all the pay-per-views that I watch on the WWE Network. Today, we're talking one and only 1997, emanating from Birmingham, England. So, one of those classic England pay-per-views that kind of went under the radar, in my opinion. A bit surprising, too, because I don't think not that I had never heard of this pay-per-view before, but I had never seen it before watching it back, and of course, on the WWE Network, but I've never seen too many people talk about this show, and it's not because it's not good. It was actually very, very good, so with a great crowd to boot. So we'll talk about just why in a second. But kicking off the show, Hunter Hearst Helmsley taking on Dude Love. These two had a whole string of matches, obviously, in 1997 from King of the Ring to SummerSlam to this show as well. Another really, really good match from Triple H and Dude Love, Mick Foley, Mankind, what have you. Per usual, nothing out of the ordinary from that. I think Triple H must have faced maybe every incarnation of Mick Foley on pay-per-view. I feel like he has. I'd have to watch back the Rumble, but I feel like was he Mick Foley? I can't recall, because I know at Hell in a Cell he was Cactus Jack. He beat Mankind at King of the Ring at SummerSlam, and he faced Dude Love on this show. So Triple H might be the only wrestler in WWE history to have faced Mick Foley in every incarnation of his character on pay-per-view. Might be wrong there, but still. Like I said, these two have had so many matches from 97 to 2000. Their chemistry was so great. This was no exception. Another really good match from the two. And Hunter Hearst Helmsley picked up the victory, as he should have, considering they saw him as the bigger star at that time. And Dude Love would go on to become WWE champion many years later, whereas Triple H was the bigger pet project at that period in time. After that, we had Tiger Ali Singh taking on Leif Cassidy, who was later known as Al Snow. He was a much better athlete at this point in time than he was years later as Al Snow and all the other gimmicks he had. So he was a bit past his prime when he had the most over gimmick of his career, but at this time he was nothing but a loser as Leif Cassidy. I think they put him with, God, I have no idea who it was, but I know they put him in like New Rockers or whatever the fuck it was. I'm pretty sure it was the New Rockers with Marty Jannetty. He might have been in one of those new Midnight Express tag teams they had at that point in time, around that period of time, but I'm pretty sure he was put with Jannetty as like the New Rockers. And I don't know if this was after that or before it, whatever, but this was pretty much a glorified squash with Tiger Ali Singh going over. The guy, for a guy who had as much, not potential, but in WWE's eyes upside, he never really went anywhere. He was not a good athlete. The character sucked. The servant and him like eating worms and shit, or eating his own boogers, or whatever the fuck that was they showed on Too Hot for TV with Jerry Springer on the network last year. This gimmick sucked. And the guy was not a good wrestler to boot, so he was gone a short time after this, but still, it's a bit surprising. Like, you don't hear that name brought up too often. The only time I'd heard of Tiger Ali Singh was when, other than watching like these 97 pay-per-views, was from that TV show. Other than that, you never hear this guy brought up, because he was not good, but at one point, officials did have high hopes for him, because they tried to push him to the moon as a single star. But anyway, after that, for the tag team titles, we had the Headbangers defending against Los Bricolas, Salvio Vega, and Miguel Perez. My pronunciation is awful, by the way. I apologize. But a really good match. The Headbangers, for as over as they were during the Attitude Era, in my opinion, were just not great wrestlers. And I never really enjoyed them, and never really liked them because of that. I mean, they were over, they were popular, they were a likable act, but they never really had, a lot like with the New Age Outlaws, I guess you can make that's a valid comparison. They never really had many, not even breakout matches, just not many quality, well-wrestled matches. But that said, this was one of them. I don't know what it was, why they had good chemistry, but they did. Didn't really give a shit about Los Boricuas, but they had good chemistry with the Headbangers. They had a really, really good match, and in the end, the Headbangers were successful in retaining their tag team titles. After that, we had the Patriot taking in Flash Funk. An alright match. The Patriot was not really that great of a worker. The gimmick was very short-lived. Obviously, they would later give his theme music to Kurt Angle. For a match that was a bit as inconsequential and as meaningless as this one was, the one purpose it did serve, however, was the fact that the Patriot, a very obviously an all-American gimmick, worked over well as a heel in England as they just booed the shit out of him. So it did work in that respect, but otherwise the match was pretty forgettable. The Legion of Doom taking on the Godwins in a god-awful match. Like I've talked about before, Legion of Doom at that point in time were just not what they were in the 80s. Arguably, if not the greatest tag team of all time in wrestling history, but for whatever reason, just when they came back in 97, 98, it just didn't have that same magic about it. It didn't have that same spark, and they just failed miserably as a result. They did not have many good matches at all during that run, and this was not one of them either. The Godwins were not good workers, to boot either, so this was really kind of a combination, all the ingredients to fail, basically, in so many words. So, not a good match. Vader versus Owen Hart after that, and a pretty good match. I mean, Vader, at that point in time, in my opinion, was still capable of having good matches. And I've talked about Vader before in that he really came into WWE with a head of steam in 1996 after the great run that he had in WCW, but they largely mishandled this guy. Really had that one and done feud with Shawn Michaels in 96, and beyond that, he was a loser. Losing to Kane, Undertaker, week in, week out, Mark Henry at one point, lost to pretty much everybody. So that said, I was surprised to be Owen Hart on this show. Vader on pretty much every show that I've seen from the Attitude Era from 96 to the 97s to 98, he's lost pretty much every single match I've seen him in. So to see him beat Owen Hart was a bit surprising, but a bit of a refreshing change of pace in that respect. But Owen Hart was so great. I mean, he was super over. It's not like he's Canadian. He was just, obviously he's Canadian, but he's not English is what I meant. But the crowd fucking loved the guy. He was super over here. A huge babyface reaction to Owen Hart. The match was good. Owen Hart, I would say, did most of the in-ring work for Vader, who was not really bad in his own right at that point in time, but still they worked well together, had a good match. Vader scored the victory to emerge victorious, so good shit there. After that, we get to our two back-to-back main event matches, Bret Hart versus The Undertaker, defending the WWE Championship against The Undertaker in our first of two main events. And honestly, I think I enjoyed this match a lot more than I did the SummerSlam match. The finish sucked. I don't know where the finish came from. Undertaker had Bret Hart choked in the ropes. It's hard to say. Like when the wrestlers have their arms wrapped up in the ropes and they can't get free for 10 minutes? This was kind of the same thing, but he had Bret Hart choked. He had his neck in the ropes, and it looked brutal. But that's what got him DQ'd. Bret Hart retained the title. But everything else before that, the match, not like it felt like it went on forever, but I mean that in the best way possible. They got a lot of great time. They made the most of it. Had a really, really good match. And honestly, I'm trying to think. This was probably one of Bret Hart's really last good matches. Because this pay-per-view took place in September, I want to say. Yeah, September of 1997. And he was gone from the company not the very next month, but 2 months later, after the Montreal Screwjob, which was not a great match. This was probably the last instant classic that Bret Hart had in WWE, in my opinion. I like this. I don't know, for whatever reason, maybe it was just the environment, the story they were trying to tell. Finish aside, I thought this was better than the match they had at SummerSlam that same year. Only a month earlier. This was a SummerSlam rematch, but I thought this was better. And you would think they would have gone with a decisive finish just because they ended up going with Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels at the Bad Blood pay-per-view only a few weeks later. So to blow off this feud, I don't know why they wouldn't have just given a decisive finish, but they kept the title on Bret Hart, which was the important thing. But at any rate, it was a really, really good match. Made great use of the half an hour they were allotted, and Bret Hart in the end was still the WWE champion. So other than the questionable finish, this was a really, really good match. And like I said, probably one of the last truly great matches that Bret Hart had in WWE, or just in wrestling in period. Because like I said, he was gone from the company in 97. And then when he went to WCW, I can't think of one truly great match he had over there. He didn't wrestle for too long in WCW, but man, he probably had a few good matches here and there, but a great match like this, I can't think of one. So this was probably, honestly, Bret Hart's last truly above average match ever. You'd have to correct me on that, but I'm pretty sure this was Bret Hart's truly last great match, in my opinion. And then we get to the main event for the European Championship, which was, I think, the first and only time the European title was defended in the main event of a WWE pay-per-view. In England, it was perfect. Shawn Michaels contending for the gold against the British Bulldog. And I believe a rematch from King of the Ring, 1996. And these two had an amazing match on that show. I think it was 96 King of the Ring. And this, no, wait a second, was it? Yeah, it was. I'm pretty sure it was 96 King of the Ring, because that was during the midst of, I thought it was the same year, I apologize. That was 96, that was a year and a half earlier, not a half a year earlier. This is 97. Really, really good match, though, fucking riddled with interference from Triple H, Rick Rude, Chyna, pretty much all the early incarnation of DX. But that aside, even that worked to Shawn Michaels' respect. Even that worked to his advantage in that it kind of made the match more entertaining, more suspenseful. You didn't know if British Bulldog would be able to win in his home country. He didn't. In the end, Shawn Michaels forced him to tap out after having him in some sort of submission lock. I forgot what it was. Maybe an ankle lock or the figure four, I think it was. And he came out on top as the new European champion, becoming the first ever Grand Slam champion in WWE history. But the match itself was great again. Got a lot of great time, over 20 minutes of awesome in-ring action. These two just had great chemistry with each other. Again, a lot like with Bret Hart, British Bulldog's probably one of his final great matches in WWE. You know what? Honestly, probably the same can be said for Shawn Michaels. Because I know he had a really good match with Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania the following year, and right before he retired, but even that wasn't as good as the match they had at King of the Ring a few months earlier, at King of the Ring 97. So, honestly, I feel like the show is kind of a landmark pay-per-view for a lot of people involved, just because it served as like, it was one of those pay-per-views that for arguably Shawn Michaels and definitely the British Bulldog and Bret Hart, they all had their truly last great matches. Bulldog and Hart probably ever, Shawn Michaels until he came back 5 years later. But still, really, really good main event. 2 awesome back-to-back main event matches. And you could say the finishes to both bouts were a bit questionable with interference from DX. Kept the heat on Shawn Michaels, protected Bulldog, so I didn't really hate it. But I could see why people didn't really like it that much. And the WWE title match, which was a bit more disputed, rather, with Bret Hart, winning via DQ after being choked in the ropes. So it looked brutal. I don't know if I would have gone with that finish, but it was what it was. The overall pay-per-view, I give it 2 thumbs up. And you guys know how I feel about the 97 pay-per-views. I am not a fan. Not because they're not good. I just do not like 1997 pay-per-views just because they don't really entertain me, or I don't know. I just didn't really, not that I don't like that time in wrestling, just the Attitude Era is just, personally, in so many words, not my cup of tea. And a lot of the wrestling that year was not great. There was a lot of awesome moments and a lot of great feuds and stuff, but matches from an in-ring standpoint, it just wasn't truly that great, which is kind of my forte. But this, from a wrestling standpoint, was an awesome show. You had 2 awesome main events. Vader and Owen Hart was a really, really good match. I mean, granted, you had a throwaway match in the Legion of Doom versus the Godwins, and then Patriot versus Flash Funk, but neither match was offensively bad. They were just kind of there, didn't really serve much of a purpose. But Headbangers versus Los Boricuas, another very, very good match. Probably the best Headbangers match I've ever seen. And Tiger Ali Singh versus Leif Cassidy was throwaway, but the opener was good too between Hunter Hearst Helmsley and Dude Love. So overall, I give the show, if not a thumb and a half up, or just overall just rounded up 2 thumbs up. I thought this was a really, really good show. And also, you guys know about how much I love the England crowds, how much of an electric atmosphere they usually are when WWE goes across the pond for their pay-per-views, Raws, SmackDowns, whatever. And this was no exception. Really, really good show from start to finish, with a few throwaway matches here and there. So I wouldn't watch the whole pay-per-view. It's about 3 hours long. If anything, I would watch the main event, but the overall show was pretty great, on the whole. So that was WWE One and Only 1997. Thank you guys for watching and listening per usual. My next review will be covering, I believe, Breakdown from 1998, as also seen on the WWE Network. But until next time, guys, I'm Graham G. Matthews, and I'll catch you folks down the road.